the God simply called into being, perhaps I should use different language, called into being X, where X didn't exist before. It's a miraculous entity. We take this on faith. I have no proof of this except God's revelation himself, which conveys information about what happened. We have to rely on God who communicates the truth about how things came to be. Because I don't have that knowledge in my own experience.
Sure, I understand.
Like that going on the bus, I don't have that knowledge. The knowledge comes from the Creator himself.
It certainly makes more sense than nothing making nothing.
Yeah, the alternative
But
suggestion...
nobody says nothing makes nothing.
No,
you guys seem to
they
claim
do.
that, but
Nothing,
when I
but
ask you
they
what
do.
nothing is, you can't explain it. It's incoherent.
Atheists often do say, they
they
defend,
say?
not you, but other atheists I've met certainly do say that they believe that something can come out of nothing.
What do they mean by that?
Well, that's precisely what I asked them.
Yes.
Because they say, oh, well, quantum events, and they have a quantum field and things pop in and out of existence. But I say to them, sorry, this quantum event, did it have energy? I asked them questions about that field.
Yes.
Did it have properties? Did it have energy? Did it have mass?
Yes,
Well, the answer is yes.
Yes.
So they don't really believe that it came out of nothing. It came out of something else that existed
Okay,
prior
so
to
it
the...
seems like they have a misunderstanding of,
Exactly.
of nothing.
But nevertheless, they do use that language frequently. I've heard it many times where, oh, of course things come out of nothing. Look at the quantum events. They're saying, do you really mean that? Upon examination, they don't really mean that. And they change. They say, oh, we don't really mean that.
Okay, so my understanding, you tell me where, if you think that I'm wrong in some way, my understanding of those events is that...
Which events are these?
So the nothingness we're talking
is
about.
it?
So nothingness defined that seems coherent to me, if you can, unless you tell me otherwise, is the absence of time and space. So that's the nothingness, that's a physical event, let's call it, for want of another word. So absence of time and space. Into that absence of time and space, Krauss and these other people and Alan Guth.
Krauss's one in his book does say that things come out of nothing.
Yeah, well, what is his nothing? Absence of time and space. It's not the it's not the non-beingness.
I agree, but what he says as a leading physicist and what he really means are two different things.
In what sense?
What he says is not really what he believes. In the sense we've already discussed. He would say that events, something can come out of nothing. He says so on the cover of his book.
Yes.
But in fact, he doesn't really mean that when you cross-examine him. And there's a guy actually down here called Mansour who's met him. He's a Muslim as well.
Yes, I know
met him,
Mansour.
and he's actually asked him this very point. And Krauss actually backs down and said, I don't mean that, I mean this. So he's not saying out of nothing really, is that this phenomenon comes out of this reality. There's something pre-existing. It has mass, energy, it has three-dimensionality, it has time, it has space, it has temporality, and these are all categories in the Kantian sense that are. Do you know about Kant's philosophy? If I'm slip into that,
so a little bit, yes.
They are synthetic a priori categories. You know, the categories that Kant had. So these are prerequisites for our having any cognition of reality in the first place. That was kind of Kant's epistemology, which I think is really brilliant. We can't see them because they are the preconditions of having any experience of the world. They're a priori realities: space, time, extension, motion, etc. We can't see these things, but they underpin our very experience of reality. They presuppose it. Without them, we cannot have experience of the reality we see around us. And what Krauss seems to be doing is assuming all those without actually saying that they exist, and they do exist. Where there is space and time, there is creation, speak theologically. God has made it. Because you can't have something out of nothing unless it's a miracle from God, and then you can have it.
That's why we talk about
it's a miracle.
What do you mean by nothing? And so my definition is absence of space and time. From that, if we listen to Alan Guth and Krauss, Guth is the most recognized cosmologist, let's say, in inflationary theory.
Yeah.
And I was listening to him recently, and what he posits is that the quantum vacuum is, let's call it, just for language so that you and I can understand each other, behind or outside of the nothingness of space and time, and it's eternal. In which case, there is no need for a God. So his postulation is that from the nothingness of absence of time and space, something must appear, and it'll come from the quantum vacuum, which could be eternal. So
is a quantum vacuum really nothing?
No.
Exactly.
But it's behind the nothingness that they talk about.
Well,
so it's like your God.
It's
exactly the same as your God.
The quantum vacuum is not nothing, despite what physicists
I didn't say it was.
No, I know, but I'm saying.
And neither do they.
Well, they're saying that something came out of something, which is back. We haven't really addressed the core issue. Is in terms of a non-theistic understanding of the universe.
Yes.
How can something come out of nothing? And the examples you've given, and Krauss, are not really saying something came out of nothing.
Yes, they are.
But
Because you're just
they're
labeling
not.
time and
They're
space
not.
as nothing.
I thought we'd already established it. They're not saying is something because when you actually look at it, there is energy and mass and dimensionality and so on that exists, and out of that came something. But that is something. It is most definitely something.
It's exactly the something like your God. The only difference.
Can I just interject a second?
A Jewish voice here.
Yeah, as far as I knew, quantum fluctuations is not without space and time. So I just checked it up over here. It says it's the temporary change.
It's not without space and time.
In other words, there is space and time.
Absolutely. Okay, well that's cool.
Yeah. So it's temporary change in the amount of energy in a point in space.
Right.
So that's what I thought, and this is what it's got. on
So
Wikipedia.
Kant would say that these are a priori categories which exist, from which we make observations and we posit ideas and theories. But we're asking, as theists or as philosophers, is where did something come from in the first place? Why is there something rather than nothing? It's the question Wittgenstein asked as the most fundamental question of all, and physicists have no explanation for that. I have an explanation. All theists do. God did it.
Yes, I know you do.
God is not nothing. He is the eternally uncreated being. Sorry?
Something.
Yes. But we're talking about the universe in terms of its properties and physics and laws. And so they came from somewhere, but they didn't come from nothing. They came from the miraculous creative power of God himself. And that's what the Quran and the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There never was nothing.
Yes.
That's right. You say yes.
Okay, yes. You got me confused then. I was very confused. Nothing makes me confused.
There always was something.
So just on your
There
point,
always was something. We call it God. You call it. Well, I don't know what you call it.
the quantum vacuum, not quantum fluctuation,
Quantum
very
vacuum is
different
not
thing.
nothing. It is.
I didn't say it was nothing.
Okay. Well,
It's
where does that
exactly
come
the same.
from?
It's eternal. That's what I'm saying to you.
How do you know it's eternal?
Because that's what I'm saying. It's a postulation. Just like you like God, you postulate the same thing. So Alan Guth, he's going to look it up. Alan Guth says that the quantum vacuum is possibly infinite. In which case, if that's the case, that's exactly the same as your God, which is infinite. The only difference is your God is contingent. It's a necessary intelligent being. The quantum vacuum is just a sense of something out there from which something else can come. There's a nothingness behind the quantum vacuum. That's the way Guth
There's a
explains it.
nothingness behind it.
So there's quantum vacuum.
What is this nothingness that's behind it?
The absence of space and time.
So what they've done is that they're saying absence of time and space, and they're calling it nothing.
Yeah.
Correct. Correct.
I think
What is your
you-
definition
you've
of
just
nothing?
shifted the problem further.
No, I
You've just
haven't.
shifted the problem.
No.
You haven't answered there's an ontological, metaphysical question here, and it's not just about origins. It's also about now, because we believe that God continues to create through evolution or through the development and
Glad to hear you
of
believe
the. Well, thank you.
Because not many people do. So
Thank you for patting me on the head.
No,
Using the right language there.
No.
That God continues through his, if you like, has a trajectory from the Big Bang, to use that language, up to today and beyond, where he has a trajectory of growth and development and evolution, the laws of physics and carbon-based life forms and so on. This is all planned and supervised by God himself. So it's not just about quibbling over the definition of nothing. Is also God continues to sustain all this and directs it in existence every moment by moment.
Well, presumably
that's
what-
the Islamic conception of God.
presumably what you really mean is he did that at the moment of expansion, because he's not doing it now, is
Yes,
he?
he is.
He's physically doing it now.
Well, he is physically doing.
Well, how is he doing it now as opposed to he set it in motion at the moment of the Big Bang, and it's all through the laws
Christians call
of
it, the
X?
Christians call it pratio continua. It means that there's a continuous creation going on. The Asherites in Islamic theology, it's called occasionalism, and I'm not saying I agree with this, but the idea is that every second the universe is being created and recreated. Every second. Right. It's there in some.
How do we
Christian
demonstrate
thinkers.
that? Yeah.
No, I'm not claiming it's true. I'm just saying
Good.
it's there.
Yeah.
The idea that the universe is continually being created out of nothing. Not every second, every micro,
All the time.
constantly. But there's constant recreation going on. That's the Asherite view.
I've got the answer.
That's a bit of a mystical
I just
thing.
want, no, not that. I just want to go
Oh,
back
another
to about the quantum empty
Okay,
space.
yes.
So it says it's a mistake to think that of any physical vacuum as absolute empty space. This is on the quantum vacuum. According to quantum mechanics, the vacuum state is not a truly empty space, but contains fleeting electromagnetic waves and particles that pop in and out of existence. So it's definitely with time and space, and it's also not empty.
I don't think you understood what I was saying, though, or what the implication is from Alan Guth's position, and that's the difference.
What were you saying?
Here you have the quantum vacuum, that's eternal, like God. On top of that, you have a nothingness, which is the absence of space and time. Quantum vacuum, acting on this nothingness of space and time, can create a universe, and that is the nothingness that scientists talk about. theologians go, no, we don't like that nothingness. We want a different version of nothingness. So I ask you, what version of nothingness do you talk about? And people have a challenge explaining to me what they call nothingness. If it's not the absence of space and time, what is it?
I don't understand.
What part is
saying?
what is unclear there?
You're saying that quantum vacuum is something that you're adding on to the idea of no space and time. I don't
Quantum
really get what
vacuum
you're saying.
is essentially
Yeah.
a proposition that is like your God, that is eternal, that has always been there, and on top of that, there is a nothingness, which is described as the absence of space and time.
What's the relationship between this nothingness and quantum vacuum?
So the quantum vacuum acts on this nothingness, and given time, it will create something will pop into existence. For want of, we are using language here to describe something. That is the.
Yeah, but the language doesn't really make sense.
In what sense?
Because you're saying it works in this nothingness. How can something work in nothingness?
That's what. But you've admitted that it does.
No,
You've said the quantum fluctuations.
I'm not nothing. That's what I said.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
But there's a nothingness that is called absence of time and space.
No,
So
it doesn't say anywhere it's absence of time. and space.
but that's what I'm saying. Scientists say that. You are saying that
Where do
you
you
don't
gain this
accept
from?
that.
Where does this come from? I can't find it anywhere. Where do you
Okay, so
gain it?
have you read Krauss's book?
I haven't read Krauss's book, but I've looked up a bit what Krauss is saying. I've heard him talk, and I don't. He talks about quantum fluctuations, but he says that the quantum fluctuations are not really nothingness. This is a play on words. It is nothing. It's not nothing. It's not nothing, right? He's calling it nothing because it's not physical reality. It's not absence of time and space, right? There's definitely time and space there, right? And there's quantum fluctuations that has to do. There's no physical matter, and that's why he's calling it nothingness, right? But that's just because there's no physical matter doesn't mean that it's nothing, right? You have this
So
quantum
if that is not
fluctuations.
nothingness, what is nothingness?
Well, if it didn't have those things of the quantum fluctuations, then it would be, and there was no time, no space, then it would be nothing. But it does have those things. It does have time and space, so it's not
Do
nothing.
you believe in different dimensions? Because maybe that's a better way of me explaining it. Do you believe there's a different dimensions?
I believe there can be different dimensions. Yeah, sure. I do believe there is different dimensions. Yeah,
Okay.
I do.
In the sense of reality and metaphysical, I guess, would be your version of different
Yeah,
dimensions.
absolutely. So the physical reality is one dimension, and God is outside that dimension and in that dimension. So
How's he in that dimension? Because most people don't think so. I'm quite happy if he is.
Yeah,
but
well,
a lot of people
yeah,
say
okay.
no, he's not. He's out there metaphysically looking down.
I
He's
know.
not
I
popping his
understand.
finger in.
Yeah, so the answer is that I believe in it's a panentheistic view, this part of it anyway. And that the idea is that there's nothing else besides God. So when God created the universe, he created it out of himself.
Okay, but that's
Right.
different to Paul's
Okay,
view.
maybe
Yep.
it's different.
It's more
Fair enough.
Spinoza.
I actually-
Spinoza.
Well, yeah.
I actually
But
agree with
it's
your
You've been reading his ethics, haven't you?
Well, in Hasidus, you've got the same thing. It says, Ein od mavad, there's nothing else besides God, which means that every single thing in the universe.
There is something Ibn Arabi in Islam also believed apparently
But I think Sufism
similar.
also have this.
There are in those margins there are those views. I don't hold to those.
Yeah, so that's we
but-
differ on this.
I
But I'm
actually
not
agree.
going to persecute him because of it. You know? And hopefully he's
Try,
not
go
gonna-
on.
But actually, if there were a God, your version makes more sense to me than his version. Your version of God is the totality of everything.
Yeah, okay.
And so in order to create anything, it would have had to come out of something from
Because
God.
nothing else exists.
Correct.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, and I agree. So that makes coherent sense. His doesn't, in my view, because he's going, we are separate. You and I are separate. We're not in any sense a part of God.
Yeah.
And yet he says God is eternal, and before the universe, God was everything. So it seems a paradox to me. Your version doesn't, if there were a God.
Actually, originally I got my
He's
version.
a Jew, by the way, so you're
I
going to have to
know,
convert
I
to
know.
Judaism.
No anti-Semitism. Okay. My original.
Just saying he's a Jew, even though he's wearing it.
Yeah. Originally, actually, I got my idea because I was interested in physics. So when I was very, very young, I studied physics, not in school by myself because we had a different curriculum. But I was interested in physics, and in physics, it taught that all forces are like basically four forces, and even those are made, come from less forces. Or like string theory says just one force. So the idea that everything comes from one force and comes to everything, right? All physical reality that we see, right? That idea was like, wow, if that's true on the physical dimension, that definitely could be true spiritually. Because spiritually, everything we know is united, but physically things look different, right? My glasses and her scarf doesn't look like the same thing, right? But it's all there is. We know from physics that there is one force that makes all that reality exist. So
What force is that?
Well, okay, we know there's a few forces, like two forces. We assume that there's one force. That would be string theory.
Okay, that's a speculative though.
It's a speculative.
Most people don't hold to that
Yeah,
as a mainstream view though, do they?
Well,
and it's gone through a lot of problems
well,
apparently over the last 20 odd years.
Well, most physicists, if they don't think that string theory is true, most physicists would say that there is some theory that should prove that there's one force. And the reason is because all forces seem to go to one point.
But at the moment, our current thing is there's about 4 forces, isn't there?
No.
Strong,
no,
electromagnetic,
no,
weak,
2,
gravitational.
No. Yeah, yes. So all those forces are true, but with it, those forces have already been united by all scientists, all physicists. They all agree they've been united, right? So it's only between gravity and the other 3 is the only issue. That's where you have string theory and all that kind of stuff. So they've already united that a long time ago, and that's why. But even before, confused.
Every week he's confused. This is what he's like all the time. He is Mr. Confused.
You can check it out. Okay. You will. So, but even before they had united it, they just assumed that it was because everything was pointing towards that direction, right? And that's why you got string theory. I don't understand string theory, so I don't think it's true. I don't know. It could be true. Maybe it's not true. I have no idea. But but I do, like most physicists, I'm not physicists, but I'm saying like I do, like other physicists, assume that there is one force.
We haven't proved it yet, but it could be. I agree with you. It's possible.
But the reason why they believe in it is because it's the same thing with the Big Bang. Right, you can't prove just because things are going back in time. It doesn't mean it could have started off really big and then got smaller and bigger again.
Close,
right?
close enough.
But you make that assumption. You kind of although. Okay, we'll leave that aside.
I know what you're
But,
doing.
Yeah, I'm not going to go.
No, don't.
But-
Not at the moment.
Not at the
You
moment.
and I can
Not
talk
at the
about
moment.
that.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later. But the point is that if that's true physically, right, where things look so different, how much more so should this be metaphysically as a general, as something as all reality, right? So that's answered, and then later I learnt about it in Metaphysics, which is
So you're a pantheist or?
panentheist, yeah. But
But with a touch of Judaism thrown in somewhere, is it? Or?
yeah, a little sprinkle of
Okay.
a few dots, yeah.
Because that kind of
of
seems to me, and tell me how, that kind of seems a bit of a paradox if you have in any way, well, it depends what you mean by your Judaism.
Well, that's what I was
guess.
just explaining. I was just explaining that panentheism is actually Hasidic, Kabbalistic philosophy, right? The metaphysics of Kabbalah and Hasidus, which is Hasidus comes from Kabbalah, is panentheism. That's the same. If you say Ein Od Milvado, if you say there's nothing else besides God, that is panentheism, right? Unless you believe that there's only the universe and there's nothing. There's no.
If there were a God, well, I do at the moment because there's no good reason to believe otherwise. But if I did take on your view,
Yeah.
yours is more
Great,
coherent.
slap five, man.
Yours is more coherent to me
Yeah.
than
And you're happy to undergo the circumcision required to fully embrace his view, yeah?
Say again? No.
When it's 13 years old.
Well, I have actually, but not because I was.
Way too much information.
But there you go. You asked the question.
I just gave an age. You talk about a second.
But I think we'd be on the same side questioning you, Paul, about why you think there could be something other than God and how that could be in.
That's a good question. See, I like this. This is a theist that I like.
He's not a theist, he's an atheist.
I'm joking. He's saying, how could there be something besides God? It's like, I can understand how there's God. How could there be something else? You know?
Exactly.
This is disgusting.
But originally, you came in a bit late. I mean, this all got to the universe where this lovely lady originally we were talking more about the moral question, and my question and Paul thought it was a loaded question.
I saw that question. Yeah.
About if theology is true.
Good. Yeah. God being good. Yeah.
Well, that too. But if theology is true, is there something in theology that I could consider good that is only available to people who believe in a God that is not available to me? This was Hitchens' sort of thing. I'm rephrasing it slightly because his version was, I grant you, a little bit different to that.
I didn't slightly more subtle. I didn't hear this argument, this point.
So, do you remember Christopher Hitchens?
I know,
Obviously,
yeah.
passed away. So his whole thing was, can you think of something that is moral?
Yeah.
That a theist could do
I'm going to move on, as
All
I've
right,
already
Paul.
covered this before.
that a non-theist could not do. And he obviously had the corollary, which is, do you think there's anything that a theist could do that would be bad for a theist to do that an atheist wouldn't do? And so that's quite an easy one, but it's the positive claim I'm interested in the sense of, because she says to me religion is useful, and I go, great. In order for it to be useful, partly, you need to have something in there that is only applicable to you as a religious person that I could not have access to, that I could agree is good. So something that would...
When you feel all alone in this world,